I'm praying for country for 2022. I am seeing two country. I'm saying this is 2022. What is coming in 2022? Two country. Are two countries? These two countries, I'm saying this, if you're hearing me, two countries, I am seeing them trying to fight each other. I'm saying this again. I'm saying this again. I'm seeing a president.
Major news. After days on the razor's edge, Ukraine is now a nation at war. Just hours ago, Russian forces began their attack. President Vladimir Putin warning other countries that any attempt to interfere with the Russian action will lead to, quote, consequences they have never seen. Let's get right to ABC's senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, on the ground in Kyiv. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. We could hear when those explosions went off behind you there in the capital city. What's the latest there now?
Yeah, that's right, Byron. I think within minutes of Vladimir Putin finishing this speech, essentially declaring war on Ukraine, we heard the sound of explosions here in Kiev. First of all, 3 large, distinct explosions in the distance. It's not possible to say exactly what the targets is. There are unconfirmed reports, potentially of the airport being struck, of other sites, but we're still really waiting to find out. And then in the last hour or so, we've heard probably about 5 or 6 other explosions. I've seen a large flash in the distance over there, again followed by a boom some minutes later, suggesting it's not inside the city, but certainly on the outskirts. And that's what people here in Kiev are waking up to this morning. And it's not just Kiev, the capital. It's a number of eastern cities like Dnipro, Kharkiv, which is closest to the Russian border, if you like, in the northeast corner of Ukraine, just over the border there. There have been Russian troops massing over the last week, and also in Odessa in the south, this crucial port city. Again, reports of explosions. Nothing yet from the Ukrainian president. If I can read you this, this comes from the Ukrainian foreign minister, who, of course, has been at the UN in New York. He's also been in Washington holding meetings, saying Putin has just launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Peaceful Ukrainian cities are under strikes. This is a war of aggression. Ukraine will defend itself and will win. The world can and must stop Putin. And obviously we've heard other statements likely to echo those sentiments. But the reality is, after all those weeks, all those months of rising tensions, many people finding it difficult to imagine that Vladimir Putin in the year 2022 would launch a war in Europe. Nevertheless, that is what Ukrainians are waking up to. We know there's a state of emergency in the country. There was something like 36,000 military reservists were called up in the last 24 hours, those with combat experience. But the Ukrainian government can and is likely to go further. Martial law declared, calling up more reservists. The Ukrainian military has a substantial size. It's around 250,000 troops, and then when you add in all the other security services and volunteers, it will be larger than that. We remember that President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, had been advised, strongly advised by the White House to leave Kiev and for his own safety and to head to the west of the country, to Lviv or potentially up near the Polish border. He obviously hasn't done that because, of course, it would send a signal to the Ukrainian people. So he is staying here, and every person you speak to says, I'm ready to fight, I'm ready to defend my country. Byron?
Ian Pannell in the capital city. My friend, you are experiencing this kind of work. Stay safe. We will talk to you soon. Vladimir Putin's decision to launch a full-scale invasion comes after weeks of diplomatic efforts by the U.S. and NATO allies to deter the Russian president. Putin never backed down. Here's a look at how we got here. As explosions rang out in the capital city of Kyiv, Ukraine's ambassador to the UN with this stern message for Russia.
There is no purgatory for war criminals. They go straight to hell, Ambassador.
Until the moment Russian President Vladimir Putin took military action, the Ukrainians were pleading for peace. Earlier tonight, in a video address, Ukrainian President Zelensky saying he tried to call Putin, but was met with silence. Putin's force, anything but. More than 150,000 Russian troops surrounding the country on multiple sides. For days, the U.S. and other NATO allies have taken steps to try to deter Putin from a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Just today, President Biden announcing sanctions on the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline and the corporations behind its construction. The move came after previously announcing sweeping economic sanctions on Russia.
As Russia contemplates its next move, we have our next move prepared as well.
Putin undeterred.
They are ready to go right now. It won't be bloodless. There will be suffering, there will be sacrifice.
Ukraine seeming to know how imminent full-scale invasion could be, declaring a state of emergency and President Zelensky activating members of the military reserve.
You need the uniform, jacket.
Dmytro Bulatov is one of those joining the fight. My colleague Ian Panel spoke with him as he prepared to report for duty.
In morning, I wake up and call to the military office and said, okay, I'm ready. Tomorrow I will be in army.
His wife anxious about his deployment, but Dmytro's sense of duty stands resolute.
This is a big moment for Ukraine.
Yes, this most important and historical moment. That's why we Ukrainians are ready to war. From our independence, for our families, for our future.
To get further context and perspective, here's ABC's chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, in western Ukraine.
There was a moment about 24 hours ago where the administration thought Vladimir Putin could be deterred, but that moment passed. The administration has been predicting this invasion for weeks and laid out all the intelligence. They said they hoped they were wrong, but they are clearly right tonight. The invasion started exactly as the way they predicted, with cyber attacks, with electronic warfare, and then we saw those blasts around Kyiv. But several hours before this attack began, I got a message from a senior Pentagon official who said, "You are likely in the last few hours of peace on the European continent for a long time to come," adding, "Be careful." A very sobering message, but captures exactly what we are facing here in Ukraine, on the European continent, the most dangerous time, as they've said over and over at the Pentagon, since World War II. I am told by a senior U.S. official that Vladimir Putin is increasingly erratic, but he could not be deterred, that several of his senior aides were concerned about what he was doing, but he would not hear it. So this is something we are going to be watching day after day. It's something that could be here, could last months and months and months.
Our thanks to Martha. What happens next, and what is America's role? Joining me now, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and retired Marine Corps Colonel Steve Ganyard, and Elizabeth Newman, a former Homeland Security official. So, Steve, I'll start with you, if I may. Explosions have been heard in eastern Ukraine, but also outside of Kyiv. Is this the worst-case scenario?
We'll have to wait till the sun comes up, Byron. We're hearing all sorts of reports from around the country, different cities being hit. We know that Kyiv, that the airport is under attack, and there's a fight going on right now with Russian special forces. So it's going to take the sun coming up and some time to figure out what's going on the ground, but it sure seems like the whole country is essentially under attack.
Elizabeth, bringing you into the conversation, several Ukrainian government and bank websites fell victim to cyber attacks today, likely launched by Russia. What's the greater goal for Russia, to disrupt the country or instill fear?
The cyber attacks are just one more element of the battle plan to bring chaos and cause confusion. The nature of the initial attacks were DDoS attacks. They weren't that sophisticated, not that big of a deal, but later this afternoon we learned that they had launched a malware attack, which basically renders the computers inoperable depending on which computers they target. That could be rather disruptive to command and control. And I expect we're likely to see more in the coming days. They do have the capability to take out infrastructure through cyber warfare, and that would, of course, cause a lot of confusion and chaos and disruption to the course of life.
Is there any expectation, Elizabeth, that these attacks might spread to these cyber attacks might spread to the U.S. or any other place in Europe?
there is definitely strong concern in the United States and among our Western allies that Russia does have attacks in the works, that they have been planting and seeding the ground to be able to launch attacks if they decide to do so. They may be holding their fire to see what the West does in response to this full-fledged invasion. They may actually decide to preemptively launch something and create confusion and frustration and domestic pressure here in the United States, because the types of attacks that we're talking about could affect our energy supply, it could affect the power grid, it could affect our food supply, which of course, not to the scale of causing life and safety concerns, but very disruptive to our daily lives.
And Steve, a closing question to you. Can the Ukrainian people stand up to this? We know they are tough and resilient people, but Russia is a large and powerful country.
Yeah, Byron, in the past, say 10 years or so, after being crushed by the Russians in 2014, the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian military have improved significantly. NATO has helped with that. But the Russian military has come back as well. In the past 15 years, Mr. Putin has had significant and large increases in the defense budget. So the Russian military is really an overmatch for the Ukrainians. It will probably quickly dissolve into sort of an insurgency like we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan, because once the Russian military gets going, it'll probably be just a matter of weeks before they roll over the Ukrainian military.
A matter of weeks. A sobering night. Thank you both.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel.
2 Peter 1 verses 2. For prophecy never came by the will of man, but a holy man of God spoke as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. Listen as the prophet of God speak.